Okay, I can't figure out a cold opening for this episode, but anyway, welcome back to another one of our audioling podcast episodes where we dive into deeper detail on one of the ghost countries covered in a regular episode on the channel. But today, we're actually not talking about a ghost country, rather a ghost geography, Minami-Torishima, or Southern Bird Island. So, yeah, I'm going to hand it over to you, Manuel, right now, but what did you think about the episode? Because for me, I actually found this fascinating. I mean, okay, I know I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but I'm on my soapbox. But what I was trying to say was, when I started begin doing research on this one, I did not expect to make it a two-parter, and I really didn't expect to find anything that interesting. Honestly, how I came across it was one day when I was walking around in my house, I noticed the globe I have, and I just saw, Minami Territory, Japan, marked, and it's an older globe from think it's actually from the 50s or 60s, but I just was like,
1860s.
yeah. But it was just kind of like, I never heard of this territory, so I decided to look into it. It was really just on a whim, and I did not expect to find that much. But honestly, to me, this was fascinating. There was this little speck of land in the middle of the Pacific, and it's got so much history, and almost had a a clash between the U.S. and Japan over territory, and it's just so weird. And even today with the REEs, the rare earth elements, I mean, yeah, it's still in progress and a development that's not yet occurred yet, but I mean, it could still have a pretty big role in Japan's history going forward, despite being this little inconsequential island in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I remember it for this episode. You were actually doing the research and stuff. And I still remember that while doing research of it, you sometimes let me know what you were doing.
Hmm.
And it was, yeah, like a rabbit hole that you found more and more. And I think that's really cool because for this island, it's not like there is like a huge article on Wikipedia or whatever, or I think even on Britannica there isn't a lot.
Oh, there's basically
So
nothing out there.
yeah, so it's actually really cool that we found a lot about this. What you said about the REEs, I mean, for those people who are not familiar with this, REE is rare earth elements. Um,
I did say that,
and
but
they are
yeah.
used basically for producing like chips basically in technical products a lot
Yeah.
like smartphones or TVs and stuff.
Oh, and a whole bunch of
um
other things as well. I mean,
yeah,
just like things you
so
wouldn't
everything which
imagine.
is connected to chips.
Well, even in
uh,
like medical equipment and fertilizer, they're used occasionally. So it's very much a multifaceted thing.
I
Rare
think
earth.
nowadays I think most of them are actually coming from China, if I'm
Yeah,
not
quite a
wrong.
few are, and that's why there was that little diplomatic or trade spat between China and Japan where, they were going to restrict the export of REEs. And that kind of fueled, this search for their own REEs in Japan. And honestly, that's going on globally because when you have, one or just a few players dominating any sector of the market, you're going to have people trying to look to, outsource or find it, diversify basically.
I think Japan has a big potential for that
Yeah.
because I think where you find very often rare earth elements is like near mountains or hills and stuff.
Hmm.
And if I'm correct, basically Japan is basically a volcano island group.
Oh yeah, but I
Um, so
I
there could be actually more.
I don't think there's been any significant findings on the Japanese mainland, but Minami-Torishima has pretty sizable reserves. Again, it's just they're very difficult to access, and there's going to have to be new technology developed and investment and all this other stuff. But still, there's considerable potential for sure. And I know Mongolia
Yeah,
actually has a pretty big rare earth element, uh, you know, reserves that have been relatively untapped right now.
yeah, yeah. But actually, these rare earth elements are a pretty new thing.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, at least that they are searching for it a lot because it's getting more and more important.
Hmm.
Um, but I do think in 10, 20 years we're gonna have a lot of countries who are exporting rare earth elements.
Oh, sure,
Um,
sure.
yeah, so at least I think so because I can imagine that a lot of countries have something similar. So that I'm thinking about South America, where they could have it a lot.
Well, yeah,
I'm
I
not that
mean,
familiar right now who's exporting that. I just heard that China is doing that a lot, and in Afghanistan there are some,
well,
but
Afghanistan's
except
got a
for that,
lot of lithium, and I think so does
yeah,
Bolivia. Those, two countries with pretty sizable reserves.
yeah.
So,
So, but coming back to our episode,
oh yeah,
um, I mean, yeah, basically that was in the episode as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I think the episode was pretty cool. I think the first and the second part are very distinct from each other and have a very different touch. The first one felt kind of like a how to call it, like an expedition or whatever, because
Hmm.
there was that one island who was discovered but not officially recognized yet. Then others discovered it again, and it had a different touch.
Yeah.
The second episode was more about the development of the island. Um, and yeah, what happened? Basically, it started with Rosehill coming back. Um, and yeah, I think they were both very cool, especially those video clips and photographs from Minami-Torishima. I think they were pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to pick up a little bit on what you said earlier, I really had a fun time doing this, and I know I said that at the conclusion of the second episode, but this really did feel kind of like a forensic file where you had to dig into it, because to your point, there was very little information about Minami-Torishima out there, and even what was out there often was wrong or just kind of vague at best. Like, I remember quite a few of the people's names and ships and a whole bunch of other factors were just misspelled or pronounced differently. I mean, at least in the older documents and stuff. And that was what I was going to say. Like because there was so little available information, I really had to dig, and that meant going into actual source material from like the 1800s and the early 1900s. And honestly, as someone who loves history, that was it was fun. It was really fun doing an investigation and looking into the information and finding out what Rosehill's name was. A Rosehill. That's what he was always listed as. It was Andrew Rosehill. And then beyond that, looking into well, Mizutani Shinroku, the Japanese citizen who, or explorer, I guess you could say, who discovered the island. We'll get into that in a moment because, Rosehill claims to have discovered it first. But what I was going to say, there's nothing about him, at least on English Wikipedia. So I had to go into Japanese language Wikipedia. I had to reach out to some connections and look into a whole bunch of different obscure websites, most of which were not in English. So really was testing my Japanese language skills there. But still, I was able to find out enough information about him to put his backstory together from beginning to end. And for me, that's fascinating because I knew next to nothing about this individual, even after doing a little bit of research. So it really was interesting to, you know, fill in all the pieces of that picture for him and also for Rosehill, because like I said, he was just there was so little to go off of in a lot of the historical documents, which mostly were admittedly just like newspapers or reports by the government and stuff like that. So I just had a
Yeah,
really fun time. It was kind of like being an archaeologist and just digging through all of the rubble and finding those few little pieces you need to put everything together again.
yeah. I mean, it already says a lot the way how you found his complete name. Um, it
Yeah,
wasn't it on like Find Your Grave or whatever.
yeah. No, I had to
Um,
track down his grave and obituary, like you said, on Find a Grave, and it was interesting because that actually gave a lot more information about his backstory, where he originally came from. Um,
I didn't even know this website, and it's pretty cool.
oh, it's a great resource. I mean, for obscure people you can't find anything about because, for the most part, it has those resources, such as the obituary or newspaper clippings and other stuff connected with their grave. So I think it was a great source. But no, with Rosehill, you know, if I'm remembering this correctly now, I think he
Please
originally came over
give his
from
correct title, Captain Rosehill, please.
well, I think he originally was from Sweden, if I'm correct, and that was interesting just in and of itself. But then also after the whole Minami-Torishima incident, finding out what happened to him, how he served for a time on the Snark, and really though did seem to be embittered and disappointed about what happened with Minami-Torishima and ultimately just, passed away kind of shortly thereafter. I mean, it wasn't immediately, but it was not that long. And then same with Mizutani. That was not through Find a Grave, but through other resources. But to see how his story went on after the Minami-Torishima incident, and to be honest, I mean, it wasn't that good for him either. Getting forced out of the company, basically losing his rights to Minami-Torishima. I mean, sure, he made a lot of money, and he did do a lot of other ventures, and even served kind of in association with the military and stuff. But ultimately he kind of came to a rather mysterious end. I don't mean like mysterious in a bad sense, but there's not a lot of information about what happened to him toward the end. It was shortly after the Kanto earthquake, but still, it was just I felt like this was really bringing life to history that truly was forgotten, at least for the most part.
Yeah, like actually, I was curious. I don't know if you know it. Is there actually anything about Mizutani on Find a Grave?
I doubt it, but you never know. I mean, I just didn't
What
look it up.
was his complete name? Mizutani was his surname, right?
Mizutani Shinroku.
Mizutani. I
Shinroku.
guess I think there is
That's the
nothing at all.
family name or
Yeah.
surname.
Wait, Mizutani is the family name, right?
Yeah.
No, there is just somebody called Herbert Gerland.
I
I don't know why he pops up.
Yeah, I don't think that's an associate. I mean, I don't think so. I don't know if Find a Grave does international graves is the thing. I didn't look into it, but if it did, that would be awesome. And if it doesn't, if there's another resource, I'm sure there's resources in each country that kind of do the same thing. But
I think they do internationally because I'm in the German Find a Grave
oh,
one right now.
okay, well
I
that
mean,
answers
that
that.
is de.findagrave.com.
Oh, well that's cool.
And they even have ones from the US. Here they say over 190 million graves
Oh wow.
since 1995.
No, but yeah, just I mean, taking it back for a second though, I also found the time period just fascinating because think about this. This was relatively it was not that long after the Meiji Revolution in Japan. So this was the coming of age for modern Japan. I mean, Imperial Japan. You had the last gasp of the shogunate, which we actually are going to have an episode about in the not too distant future. But once that was pushed aside, you had this drive in the new Japan for modernization, a European style army, expansion. And a lot of this was occurring in the context while similar stuff was occurring elsewhere. Like you had the Guano Islands Act in the US, so this was definitely a territory grab, not so much just for the sake of territory, but there was money involved at the time. And it's just such an interesting period of time. And then back in Japan, you had notions like Nanshiron, excuse me, Southward Advance Theory. So this was basically Japan had to achieve self-sufficiency and self-defense through expansion southward. And when you look at the sheer amount of uninhabited or unclaimed islands, and this included islands like Wake, Midway, yeah, it was well, like we talked about in the episode, it wasn't uncommon for Japanese poachers and just adventurers and other people to be found on Midway or some of the other islands in the North Pacific, Wake, etc. So it really was kind of like a free-for-all age of exploration in the Pacific, with Japan playing a very big role being located where it was, and I just find it fascinating.
Yeah, it definitely does. It reminds me a little, as a German, it reminds me a little. How did you call this? Southern expansion?
Oh, Southward Advance Theory. It's
Yeah,
Nanshiron.
that reminds me a little like Germans had this kind of um,
Oh,
like living space in the East,
sh-
basically.
sure. I thought you were going to talk about the gate shut panic with the colonies in Africa, but no, go on.
No, I was talking about like where actually with the Nazis,
Like Lebensraum?
especially. Yeah, exactly. Um, so basically, where they were thinking about expanding to East to create more space for Germans to settle down.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, that sounds a lot nicer than it actually was.
Well, sure,
I mean,
yeah.
their plan was, yeah, the conquest and basically to murder everybody there or to deport them.
Hmm.
But yeah, it reminded me kind of that. Or, well, some 100 years back, Manifest Destiny,
Hmm.
similar, not as bad as this one here, but still like the drive to expand into a certain area.
Oh no, of course. I mean, all the things you mentioned. I mean, it's a land grab basically, and obviously there's different aspects to each of them. I mean, their story's not exactly the same, but it's an outward expansion, a push for expansion. And I do think it's worth mentioning, because we talk about him briefly in the Minami-Torishima episode. Enamoto Takayaki, uh, he's a very interesting individual who will make, kind of like in our weird, cinematic universe here on Ghost Countries, he's going to make an appearance in future episodes. But he was a very big proponent of the Southward Advance Theory that I was just talking about, Nanshiron. And he was, as I said, a big proponent, a big advocate for it. And Mizutani was kind of, well, an explorer caught up in the winds. And I mean, this was the ideology of the day, so it's obvious he would, take part of it. And he did. He was bouncing around all over the North Pacific and even into like further down south. Um, but then eventually, as we talked about in the episode, he decided to take up the search for Grampus Island, which also was just a fascinating bit of completely unknown history to me. This mysterious, fabled island with virgin forests and good ports and, natural resources that was untouched and unclaimed somewhere in the North Pacific. And there were explorers, in the Tokugawa and Meiji periods. I may have been wrong with that one period, but there were explorers up until the Meiji period, definitely searching for this island, Mizutani being one of them, and instead, happened upon the then kind of unclaimed island of what was still known as Marcus Island, at least in, English speaking, well, the US and stuff like that. But I still just, it's fascinating in my opinion.
You know, about that Grampus Island, I got another theory why it's called Grampus Island.
Oh, you don't
It's
believe
a
the whole. Uh,
no, that's all a conspiracy theory about big fish. No, I got a much more reasonable explanation. And
okay.
actually, the island is not called Grampus Island, but Krampus Island.
Krampus.
Yeah. So maybe that's the island where the Krampus is living on.
Yeah, it's a theory. It's
It's just
definitely
that
a
the
theory.
geographic area is like on the other side of the world to compare with where the people thought it was.
Oh
For
my
those
god.
people who don't know who the Krampus was, just check it up. It's like, how to explain that? Like
Dark version of Santa,
yeah,
anti-Santa.
the evil version of Santa, basically, with a lot of claws and
Well, doesn't
horns.
he steal away children who are, naughty or something like that?
I think so, but I could be wrong with that. But I think so too.
Well, at least he did in
Um,
the most recent, movie. And I do have to be honest, this is unsolicited, but the Krampus Christmas movie, it's a dark horror comedy, but it's a
Dark
pretty
horror
good.
comedy
Yeah,
always sounds well.
it's a pretty good Christmas themed horror movie if you're into something like that. But no, getting back to it for a second, I just wanted to take note, like, so I know with the Minami-Torishima incident, nothing really came of it except Japan remained in control of the island, and Rosehill's claims were negated. So it wasn't like there was a big clash or anything. But I really do want to drive home the point how important this was to the psyche in Imperial Japan of outward expansion, particularly in the Pacific. Um, I have a quote here from Ishii Kikujiro, who, as I mentioned in the episode, played a pretty big role in foreign affairs. This was in a report later issued that was titled Personal Views on the South Sea, issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And basically he states, quote, "The Pacific Ocean drew much attention from many countries. On the ocean there are many unoccupied islands. Japanese are to advance into these islands. I am surprised at the fact that many Japanese have already advanced by boat to various islands. Furthermore, it is imperative that Japan increase its presence in the South Sea. Such islands as the Mariana Islands and the Caroline Islands are where Japanese can do business. For those who want to move to the region, we should build Western sailing ships so we can rent them. Provide incentives, establish Ogasawara Island as a base for South Sea management, set Minami-Torishima as the first station, move south from the station, sometimes dispatch warships, and protect migrant workers to improve our developments in the South Seas region. Basically, this Minami-Torishima in many ways kick-started true southern expansion into the Pacific region for Japan. And I mean, of course, with World War One, they got to take a few of the German territories, actually pretty much all the German territories in the Asia Pacific region, and that included some of those islands mentioned in quote.
Yeah. No, I think it's really impressive. I mean, I didn't know anything about this whole, basically, to be honest, about the Meiji Restoration in general, and this time period. I knew nothing. Um, so it was for me actually very cool. I mean, this quote, what you just said, I didn't know it neither. So, um, yeah, very fascinating, that whole issue.
No, I like, yeah, I agree. And then, well, we will get more into the Meiji Revolution and or Restoration, different ways you can term it, but
If you
in
don't
a
know
few
anything about this, The Last Samurai.
yeah, no, exactly. That will be covered too to some degree in a future episode that's upcoming. But no, like I said, this period is so fascinating to me because I feel it is definitely overlooked. Um, well, at least in my opinion, from Western English speaking sources, it's kind of just a side note in history, truly forgotten in a lot of sense of the word. And
I
like,
do I do think actually the episode what you were just like teasing,
hmm,
I think that is already out by the time that podcast is done,
oh, that might
isn't
be
it?
true.
I I'm not sure about the timing, but that should be our seventh podcast here.
Well, if it is, hope you enjoyed it and learned a few things.
And nobody knows which episode we're talking about.
Oh my gosh. But
No,
what I was
yeah.
going to say, another part that I just found, again, fascinating, and I know I'm using that word a lot, but it was just, I never heard anything about it, was the whole bird skin pirate situation. How you had these roving bands of like Japanese poachers coming onto islands, some of which were claimed by America, but that claim wasn't really strongly enforced at the time, Wake being a good example, or some of the other islands in the Hawaiian chain, island chain, like I mentioned, you actually had the U.S. military, the Navy, chasing off Japanese poachers, and you also had guano collectors on some of these islands, kind of setting up like task force to defend beaches and have night patrols and stuff like that, so Japanese poachers couldn't come onto the island and kill all the birds for their feathers, their plumage, because
But I hope these pirates gave themselves a different name than bird skin pirates.
yeah, no, that was the
Because
name applied to them. I don't even know if they would call themselves poachers. I think it would be just
or
more,
pirates, I think they would call themselves merchants or whatever.
yeah, more than likely, more than likely. But it was just fascinating to me, and it's like you see two different economic systems at the time as well, because while the U.S., the Americans were really pushing, gung ho on guano, the Japanese were going full on for plumage. And I mean, also the taxidermy business. And most of this was actually going to Europe, museums and the fashion industry and stuff like that. So it's
Yeah, so
fascinating
it's
to
all
see.
our fault. I get it. It's all our fault.
No, but it's just fascinating to see two different competing economic interests at the same time,
Yeah, that's definitely
mixed in
true.
with the whole territorial and, expansionism and all this stuff. It's like, it's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, that was actually noticeable as well in the episode that you got the ones who were actually going crazy for guano and the other one for plume, basically.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And actually, before this episode, I didn't even know what guano was.
Oh, well.
And that there was actually, I think you mentioned that in the episode, that there was even that guano period in Peru.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mentioned that. Where
Is-
it was just such a dominant trade for the country. It was the guano era.
Yeah, that's really so cool because I wouldn't even know what guano is in German.
Well, it was huge
I,
for fertilizer at the time. And what's kind of ironic when you think about it, again, I know REEs are used for primarily electronics, as we mentioned, fiber optics, microchips, various things of that nature. But it is used in fertilizer and healthcare as well. But I was just going to say there's kind of a irony or something there that, Minami-Torishima first was a major source for, well, later the Japanese used it for guano and stuff, and now it's like, hey, look, guano mining, and it's like, hey, now, maybe REEs will be the next boom for that little island.
Yeah. So it's definitely cool, and actually even the role that they played in the Second World War. I mean, you said like there
Yeah.
was no real invasion taking place, but you could see that it was kind of important just to the fact that there were bombardments.
Oh, definitely.
If it
Definitely.
didn't count, they wouldn't have done so because it's so small. Why should that? Why should anybody care?
Well, that was kind of part
Uh,
of the whole island hopping strategy where it's like, we're not going to take every island. The Americans are not going to take every island. It's more just strategically as they move toward the Japanese mainland, because if you really fought a pitched battle for every island, I mean, the casualties and the time and everything would just be, through the roof, I would imagine. But yeah, no, it was still strategic enough that the Americans did a concentrated naval and aerial bombardment campaign, like you mentioned, and after the war came to occupy the island for decades.
it was actually interesting. I don't know if you know that. Do you know how? I mean, how in the US this island is called? Is it still called Marcus Island in the US, or is it? I mean, I know there's not a lot of news about this island, probably, but if you can find resources about this, do they call it Minami-Torishima or Marcus Island?
At least in everything I saw that was like, contemporary. So talking about like the discovery of like REEs, or there was that weird article that Minami-Torishima had suddenly vanished and it's like, oh, where'd it go? Um, which is really
Whoops.
weird because there's actually a lot of stories about islands in the Pacific just vanishing. I'm blanking on the name of the captain, but one, I'm pretty sure it was with the Morning Star, the Hawaiian Evangelical Association missionary ship. I just don't
Yeah,
remember
I
if
remember that name.
I just don't remember if it was when he was captaining that ship, but he gave an account of an island that vanished, and when they got there, all that was there were just some floating debris like palm leaves and coconuts and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is interesting. And I don't remember if it was that captain, but I did come across reports like that where the island had suddenly vanished and all they found was just some debris floating in the water. But no, to your point, to your question, I think Minami Torishima is called Minami Torishima almost without a doubt in contemporary coverage.
Yeah,
It's only in more older coverage that I see it referred to as Marcus Island. Like, I know, like I said, even on that globe I had from like the 50s or 60s, maybe it's not as old as that, but swear it was called like the Minami Territory. Um, or maybe that was just abbreviated. But I do remember seeing it called Marcus on like a historical globe I had, but everything else it's Minami-Torishima. You don't really hear Marcus at Marcus Island Advanced anymore.
okay. Yeah, that's interesting because like you got that sometimes that they don't change the names and then you just have the ancient name.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
I
you
mean, for
still.
example,
Oh, sorry.
like we have that, for example, in German that certain cities still have German names,
Hmm.
especially in areas which previously were owned by or member of the Holy Roman Empire, such as Milan, um, or Venice and
Oh,
stuff
that's
like this.
interesting. That's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Um, or for example, actually big parts of Transylvania as well. There is, for example, that one city which is got my Romanian pronunciation. Uh, Cluj-Napoca. I'm pretty sure I did that badly, but I did a student exchange there when I was younger, and I remember that there was, I mean, these Romanian kids that we saw, they uh, they were learning German, and they always referred to the city as Klausenburg,
Hmm.
which means like Castle of Klaus.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting.
Um, and yeah, so like there's actually a lot of like these kind of things where the cities actually have German names.
Well, and you will see on it depends on the map and stuff, but I mean, even today you'll see like, Myanmar and then in parentheses Burma. On some older maps you'll see the same thing with like
Siam.
Taiwan, Formosa,
Yeah,
uh
or Thailand, Siam.
Siam, yeah. Or trying to think what else. Sri
There was
Lanka,
there,
you'll see Ceylon.
Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe,
Uh,
South Rhodesia or Southern Rhodesia, or
yeah.
just Rhodesia. Zambia, Northern Rhodesia. You'll see things like that, or it's pretty rare to see like a DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congo as Zaire, but sometimes that pops up.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It just depends on when the map is you're getting. But I think the one that I see most often like that is Burma, Myanmar, or Myanmar, Burma.
It's actually really funny because when I went to school, so long time ago, no, like more or less a decade
Oh
ago.
gosh.
That sounds like I'm so old. Well, anyway, when I was in school, I remember we had those big geography books where you had like world maps.
Hmm.
And I swear on some of them, we still had Eastern Germany and Western Germany.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And I mean, that's pretty ironic in a German class, which is like talking about the geography. Like, come on, guys. I mean, it's, you know, 25 years ago. At that time, it was almost 25 years ago. Could have at least a little updated um, geography books.
Yeah, no, I get that. Now, actually, on that note, though, talking about going back in time a little bit, I thought it was kind of crazy that Minami-Torishima, more than likely, uh, is Birth Island in Pokemon.
Oh, that's actually something that I wanted to talk about
Yeah,
because
it's crazy.
I feel so dumb because I never saw Minami-Torishima because that I think we talked about this once in privacy, and
Hmm.
you said that that was somewhere at the end of the game.
Or like further in it, but yeah, you have to. I don't know what you had to do to get to Birth Island because I
There
actually.
was like a dual tower or whatever, and I think after that it came.
Hmm,
But unfortunately, I never played it completely through. I mean,
oh my
I
gosh.
was winning against the top four and all that stuff, but at a certain point, I always just stopped because it was not interesting anymore. And if I knew that there was coming like another island, I mean, it's small, but anyway, interesting.
Yeah, no, I just thought it was kind of crazy, and also the Sevi Islands in general probably correspond with like the Ogasawara slash Bonin Islands and the Izu Islands from Japan. So it is kind of cool to see those real world connections and inspirations in a game like that because I mean, almost all of us, I'm sure, grew up with one of the generations of Pokemon, and it's like, that's cool. That's neat. It really is.
First one was, I mean, they're all like real Japanese regions as well, aren't they? I mean, Kanto.
Yeah, Kanto's
Yeah.
real. I mean, that's got Tokyo and stuff.
And I think the second one was called Kyoto. I don't know if
Hmm.
Kyoto is a region as well.
I feel like there's Chubu as well, but I might be wrong with that.
Yeah, but like when I was a child, I didn't know that,
In
but
Pokemon, I meant.
it's really cool.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really cool, and I just thought that was a neat little side note to include because it's like this random island that.
So, but of course, right now there is a question that everybody has here.
Hmm,
You said Kanto area is like around Tokyo.
hmm,
So which city in Pokemon Fire Red was Tokyo?
I have no idea.
I guess it was that one where you even get like into this fighting dojo
Okay.
because
I,
that
I
was a
don't know
pretty
why I
big
can't
city
even
with high
remember. I
buildings.
mean, Fire or Red was the first Pokemon game I played, but I can't remember so much of that game now.
And the first one that I played, and I know like sounding old, was red and normal red. I think in
Yeah,
Japanese it's red and green. In
yeah,
German it was red and blue.
yeah. No, it was Red and Blue in the U.S. as well, but yeah.
The strange thing though is when they did the updated version, it was fire red and leaf green.
Mm.
And it's like, come on, guys. I mean, if you did the first two episodes red and blue, why don't you just leave it in later on? Because it doesn't make sense that it's leaf green right now.
Did you ever play Yellow? I remember that came out after.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I liked it, but on the other hand, I didn't like it because Pikachu was so annoying. Let's be honest. Like he was always like in a bad mood or whatever.
Okay,
No,
so this
like
is off topic, but who's your favorite Pokemon then? Any generation from first to current.
Oh God, any generation. I mean, I'm a kind of nostalgic old generation
Oh,
guy.
I am too here. I would say my favorite is Haunter from Gen 1, otherwise known as Ghosto in Japanese or Japan. So yeah. I don't know why I liked
Ghost.
Haunter more than Gengar. So
Yeah, actually, I
Gengar.
liked him as well. Actually, I liked him more than Gengar as well.
Okay, cool.
Um, but my favorite, that's difficult. Um, I mean, there would be a lot of people who would, I don't know how to call them in English, like the third development of that fire salamander in
Oh,
English.
Charizard.
Yeah, exactly. Like in German, his name is totally different. That's
What
why
is it?
I
Let's hear
don't.
it.
Glurak.
I would never have guessed that, but okay.
But that's bothering me right now. Okay, wait, I gotta think about it. My favorite Pokemon.
I also did like Lugia. That's a later generation.
Yeah, that's second generation. Yeah,
Coughing, I liked. I also know his Japanese name is Dogasu. Um, yeah.
I liked. What was his name, man? Um, okay, maybe I'll say that in the next episode.
The next episode.
Stay tuned. um,
Oh, and didn't you
I'll
have
think.
something to say that you didn't say few episodes back at this point about or maybe it's not a few. I'm getting
You
my
mean
brain
you mean
completely wrapped
about
around.
yeah? You mean about Epicurus?
Yeah, there. That was the joke you forgot to say in the Epirus podcast.
Yeah, I was so mad at myself. I was like, "Oh man, I prepared the perfect joke." This like that is German humor, guys. That's if you ever ask yourself, "Do German are Germans funny?" Here, there you have it. No, we aren't.
Oh my gosh. Well, on that note, I guess we can wrap up this episode. But I just want to say again very quickly, I really found it fascinating, and I hope you guys, well, A, enjoyed this podcast and the actual episodes themselves. But you know, we're going to be doing more ghost geography going forward. Again, bread and butter of the channel is always going to be ghost countries, but ghost geography pairs very well with that because there's plenty of examples where there's like an island or a little enclave or enclave, just a little bit of territory that you're like, why is this here? Why is this included in country A instead of country B? And that's basically the story we're going to be telling. And I mean, again, there's countless islands in Japan and the Asia Pacific we could do this with, but looking at it worldwide, there's just so many little weird stories out there that I think deserve, their time in the light as well. So we'll be doing
What
this
about
again
favorite
for sure.
Pokemon?
Hmm?
I sorry, a bit off topic. I found my favorite Pokemon,
Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, let's hear this. This is a good
but
ending note.
but, but I don't know how to pronounce it in English. Uh, Gyarados or
Oh,
Gyarados?
Gyarados. Gyarados.
Yeah, I really liked him.
Yeah,
And
well,
actually, there was in the later versions there was even a red one.
yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you like the standard blue or did you like the red?
I like the blue.
Oh, okay, I remember I always caught the red. I forgot which game that was in, but I remember catching him.
There was I think that was in Fire Red, wasn't it?
Was it? Did I play Fire Red? I don't even remember at this point, which is kind of sad.
That's so long time ago, guys. Like, don't forget we are old.
Not that old, hopefully, but yeah, no, I know. Anyway,
I am
guys,
old. Okay, I am old.
yeah, let's use that clarification. No, anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed this podcast. Really hope you enjoyed the episodes about Minami-Torishima. If you haven't checked them out, it's two-parter, but definitely worth it in my opinion. So
Yeah.
go watch it, like it, comment, share, whatever. And I guess we'll see you again next time.
Okay, guys. See you next time.
Bye, guys.